Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the clown decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better, and luckily, just before Christmas, I have some good news for us, who are inevitably the sensible ones in this culture war, because we finally have some pushback against the madness of trans kids in schools. So, Kemi Badenoch on Twitter said, "Today the government has published guidance for schools for gender questioning children. We have done this because many schools have told us that they didn't know how to deal with the issue. Here are some principles that underpin this guidance." So, good thing that they've got guidance, but as we'll get into, this really should be law. "There is no general duty on schools to allow a child to socially transition. No child is born in the wrong body. Some children may not like their body and we should help them, but social transitioning is not a neutral act and should only happen in rare circumstances." Again, this is a good starting step, but in reality, Kemi Badenoch should be saying this should not be happening at all. But when you live in the current political paradigm, it's quite hard to make definitive, sensible statements like that, unfortunately. "The principles of biological sex is real. Schools and colleges have specific legal duties that are framed by a child's biological sex. Sex is not assigned at birth, it is observed at birth, and schools need to be aware of this." This is, again, the government following on from the Wellington Project's talking points for years. The Wellington Project, me, John, the rest of them, have all been of this mind, that sex is not assigned, gender is not assigned. It is simply observed, it is deemed, it is a reality of the secondary sex characteristics of your chromosomes. There are some people that don't fit neatly into one category or another. That does not mean we throw out the categories. Gender stereotypes do not define sex. That is true. "The third principle is that parents should be included in all decisions relating to a child's request to socially transition. No one loves children more than their parents, and it is wrong to exclude parents from what can be a pathway to irreversible medical decisions." That's just obvious. At the age of 18 and beyond, do what you want. You are no longer under your parents' guardianship. Before then, though, it is absolutely down to their say what you can and can't do. And even then, it should be within the law. Of course, it's very famous that Susie Green, one of the co-founders of Mermaids, the trans child charity, bought some plane tickets for her and, at the time I believe he was 16-year-old son, to go over to Thailand and have sexual reassignment surgery. That is illegal in Britain. I don't think it should be legal to get plane tickets and then come back having had an illegal surgery elsewhere. However, that is a very sticky part of the law, so technically there was no wrongdoing, but hey, paedophiles were taking 14-year-old girls over to Germany to legally have sex with them over there. The law could do absolutely nothing, and you ended up with a bunch of vigilantism. I imagine the same thing would happen if that was happening here, so laws had to be changed in Germany to say that only Germans can consent at 14, and no other nationality can. The same thing should apply to foreign transition surgeries. "The fourth principle is that schools and colleges should be respectful and tolerant places where bullying is never tolerated. We should treat each other with compassion and consideration. We should not be compelling speech or attacking others because of their beliefs or identity. And finally, we outline that schools and colleges have duties to safeguard and promote the welfare of all children, not just for those making a request for social transition, but all the children in a school. Knowing a child's sex is critical to a school's safeguarding duties." And as far as the summary of these principles go, I am very happy with them. I can see nothing wrong with anything that Kemi Badenoch has said there. The only criticism I would have is that I think Kemi Badenoch is giving a bit too much leeway to the other side of this debate, because I don't see how confusing a child about what gender and sex are is anything short of abuse. But like all things in the clown decade, we've got to take these things one step at a time, and that is exactly what Kemi Badenoch is doing. So, let's have a look at the guidance for gender questioning children. In the foreword, it says schools and colleges are places where children should be given knowledge, the skills and the opportunities to succeed in life. Maybe just an education could have been a quick way to say that. In recent years, we have seen a significant increase in the number of children questioning the way they feel about being a boy or a girl, including their physical attributes of sex and the related ways in which they fit into society. This has been linked to gender identity ideology, the belief that a person can be a gender that is different to their biological sex. Great stuff, already denying that type of thing. And it's not just saying kids can't do this, it's saying all people can't do this, which is very good, because of course, why, if an adult can change their gender, why couldn't a child? And that is a fair enough assumption, so well done. Because you've gone after kids, you've opened the floodgates for people to go, well, all right, you're not a woman then either, if you just because you claim you are one. You're a woman if you have the correct chromosomes and the correct secondary sex characteristics. Oh, what about the exceptions to these rules? Sod the exceptions, I don't care. This changing picture has left schools and colleges in a position where they are having to navigate a highly sensitive, complex issue which is still not properly understood. We appreciate how daunting this is for schools and college staff and for parents and children too. Excellent start. Stating the obvious, you cannot change your gender. It will always be the same as your sex because the words are synonymous. I don't care what John Money said. We understand that this is a sensitive issue and this guidance will help you understand how you are supposed to navigate this, and you'll have government backing if you follow this guidance. Excellent start. That is why, for the first time, the Department for Education, working closely with the Government Equality Hub, has worked to produce this guidance to provide clarity for schools and colleges and reassurance from parents. Schools are facing requests to take action such as changing names, uniforms, or using different facilities to help a child appear more like the opposite sex, with the expectation that they will be treated as if they are. This is often referred to as social transitioning. This guidance is based on a set of 5 general principles that the schools and colleges can use to frame their responses to such requests. Schools and colleges have statutory duties to safeguard and promote the welfare of all children. Schools and colleges should be respectful and tolerant, places where bullying is never tolerated. Parents should not be excluded from decisions taken by the school or college related to requests for a child to socially transition. Schools and colleges have specific legal duties that are framed by a child's biological sex. There is no general duty to allow a child to socially transition. Which, as guidelines go, all pretty good, yes. I don't like bullying. I don't like the idea of bullying. It should be the school's duty to stop bullying. Of course, kids are in the school's welfare, so it is up to them to make sure that the kids are not in any sort of danger or in any sort of abusive situation. Obviously, the schools are looking after the kids on behalf of the parents, so of course the parents should know practically everything that goes on in schools. And of course, when it comes to the law, absolutely everything has to do with the biological sex of the child. There is nothing in the law to do with gender. And of course, schools don't have to affirm a child's gender because it is incredibly unethical to actually affirm anyone's social or mental deviancy. It's in the Code of Ethics for Psychologists. The last thing they do is affirm what their patients are telling them. The CAS review is clear that social transition is not a neutral act, and that better information is needed about the outcomes for children who undertake degrees of social transition. This means that schools and colleges should take a cautious approach and that decisions should never be taken in haste or without the involvement of parents. Schools and colleges should consider how best to fulfil their safeguarding duties towards the child who is making such a request and their peers, ensuring that any agreed course of action is in all of their best interests. There will be some requests for a type of social transition that will not be compatible with a school's legal duties, and schools must abide by this. Very good. Make it clear that schools will be prosecuted if they break the law when it comes to socially transitioning kids. Because you may have seen on the Kemi Badenoch tweets that there were some community notes that hadn't been posted yet. Well, a lot of them were people trying to claim that there are better mental health outcomes when children socially transition. The problem is that it's pretty well understood in psychology that there are a lot of short-term mental health benefits for affirming someone's mental health disorder. Let's say they're bulimic or obese or something like that. If they are affirmed into their poor mental condition, let's say they're bulimic, and they're affirmed that yes, you can keep on being bulimic, it's not bad for you at all, there will be good mental health outcomes because, of course, people are going to feel better when they are told what they're doing is fine or okay. However, in the long term, obviously, there are bad mental health outcomes because they become more depressed over time because they know something's wrong with them. They know they don't fit in properly, etc., etc. So, of course, there does need to be better long-term studies done on transition kids, which we are going to get in a few years because this has been allowed to go on for so long, but for now I think it's good to just shut the whole thing down because we need to find out what's going on. Because in the long term, when you have suspected gender dysphoria in kids, an awful lot of the time it just turns out that the kids are gay. It's like over half the time. I remember going through a study in an older video. I think it was a H Bomber Guy video, actually. So it's good that this sort of thing is being looked at and, in fact, stopped. We are now consulting on this guidance and welcome responses from the likes of parents, teachers, head teachers, pupils, and clinicians. Nothing is more important than keeping children safe, and we are grateful to all those who will help us get this right. So yes, excellent forward, and gives us a good idea of what this guidance is going to be all about. This is children's mental health we're talking about, so schools, you have a lot of responsibility not to make their mental health any worse, not to confuse kids. As far as the government is concerned, this is what you should be teaching kids and how you should be dealing with gender questioning children. So let's get right to the meat of how schools are supposed to deal with gender questioning kids and how they engage parents. Children questioning their gender may make different requests. Schools and colleges should not proactively initiate action towards a child's social transition. Action should only be considered after it has been explicitly requested by the child and the steps set out below have been followed, including engaging with the parents. There could be instances where children disclose first to their teachers that they may be questioning their gender. If there is no change being requested, teachers can listen respectfully about a child's feelings without automatically alerting parents, but for safeguarding reasons cannot promise confidentiality. If a school or college wishes to accommodate degrees of social transition, we advise to do the following. So already, I don't think that this is bad guidance. When you are dealing with anyone psychologically, it is always good to listen to how they feel. Because the main thing with dealing with people who don't feel particularly like they fit in or are having some sort of negative feelings, the main thing is to just listen to them. Let them feel like they've been heard. That's the most important part of it. You don't have to necessarily do anything about it. Most men in happy marriages know that all you have to do really is let your wife feel like she's been listened to. Beyond that, it doesn't really matter what you do. So allow for watchful waiting. Wait for a period of time before considering a request, to ensure it is sustained and properly thought through decision. This period of watchful waiting may help to ensure unnecessary action is not undertaken. Good start already. If you are not automatically affirming it and just saying to the child, okay, we understand what you are requesting, but we need to wait for a period of time to see if this is the right move, then if this was literally just a phase in puberty, let's say, then you can wait for the child to get through that phase and realise that this really isn't for them. The second thing is to make the parents aware. If a child requests a change, schools and colleges should make parents aware of the situation and can point them to support outside the school environment. For example, pastoral or medical support, if they request more information. The only exception to this is the very rare situation where informing parents might raise significant risk to the harm of a child. Yes, that is fair enough. It's obviously protecting the child's own welfare if it is likely the child will be abused in some way by the parents if they are made aware of this. However, if that is the case, I think that transitioning the school should absolutely not happen. Again, once they turn 18, they can move out and do whatever they want. So if after a period of time of watchful waiting, the child would still like their request to be granted, schools and colleges involving their designated safeguarding leads are advised to take into account the following points. The school or college's safeguarding obligations. Legal duties will differ depending on the request. These are outlined in the guidance below, where the guidance advises that schools or colleges should adopt a certain approach or are able to set clear rules in a particular area. This should apply to the overwhelming majority of cases and be the starting point for decision making. However, in some areas, the school or college must be prepared to depart from the expected approach or from those rules in exceptional cases where it is necessary to do so to safeguard and promote the welfare of a child. In doing so, they should note that safeguarding requires an individual to consider what is in the best interests of the child, which may not be the same as the child's wishes. And the guidance states where schools or colleges do not need to consider an exception. So, in other words, if you are going to socially transition a child, which, as they already say, will be in exceptionally rare circumstances, they cannot break the safeguarding obligations that are set in law, which we will go into a bit later. But if they do have to break these obligations, they will have legal recourse to do it, and that will be in extremely rare situations. It's even likely that it won't ever happen. The view of the parents. It is important that views of the child's parents should carry great weight and be properly considered. We would expect parental consent to be requested in the vast majority of cases. Fair enough. The age of the child. Age is a factor whenever making a decision of this nature. Requests from younger children in primary school should be treated with greater caution. They are more vulnerable as they are less able to articulate their feelings and will have a less mature understanding of complicated issues. Yeah, I see a lot of trans people saying that 16 should be the point where it's only what the child says, and to be honest, I'm not fully on board with that, but I do think it's good in this guideline that the government has been made aware and does acknowledge that the age of the child does matter, because a 7-year-old is not going to have the same understanding of sex and gender as a 17-year-old. But having said that, this guidance clearly does make it a lot harder for anyone in school to make a social transition, and I see that as a positive step forward, because there's news of some schools where the amount of LGBT kids and, well, trans kids alone is something like a quarter of the population of the school, and it's just obvious that that should not be happening anywhere. There is no way you have a school that is a quarter filled with trans children. It's just impossible. It's probably more likely to win the lottery than for that to actually be the case. All relevant clinical information that is available. When neither children or the parents are obligated to share medical advice with schools and colleges, where such advice is available, schools and colleges should factor it into their decisions. So, kids and parents don't need to share medical information of their children to the school, but if it's available, then do use it. In other words, if enough doctors have got together and put together a record that a child genuinely does have gender dysphoria and that socially transitioning would help them, then take that into account. And it is much more likely that a child in that situation will be able to socially transition. But I think, again, that is going to be rare, because I think with all the changes being made to gender clinics throughout the country, you're going to see basically no influence from mermaids and a lot of influence from genuine psychologists. The seriousness and context of the request. Schools and colleges should take into consideration whether the child has made similar requests previously and whether the child has properly considered the impact of their requests. As part of testing whether this is a sustained request, schools and colleges should seek to understand societal and other factors that may have influenced the child. For example, has the child been influenced by peers or social media? Yes. Does the child feel pressured to identify differently because they simply do not align with stereotypes associated with their sex? This is relevant as some people think gender identity reinforces stereotypes about men and women. And yeah, this is definitely true. I am definitely one of those people that people would probably think was a little bit theatrical, let's say, when I was younger, and probably even now, to be honest. I didn't conform with the sporty jock type persona that a lot of other boys were. I was a lot more, let's say, meek and, well, as I say, theatrical. But just because of that, that doesn't mean that I should socially transition. Just because I'm not your stereotypical boy doesn't mean I should have ever been considered to have gender dysphoria. But a lot of kids, the way this is all being taught, will understand it that way. They'll think if boys are playing with a Barbie doll once for a week, that means that they must be the type to socially transition. Whether it may be appropriate for schools and colleges to seek input from SENCO or the college's SEND lead. For those who don't know, a SENCO or SEND lead are the Special Educational Needs Officers. In other words, is there another mental health problem that the child is suffering with, and have the Special Educational Needs Officers found anything of that sort? Is there an interaction with the child's sexual orientation? Schools and colleges should note that the CAS review heard from young lesbians who felt pressured to identify as transgender males, and conversely transgender males who felt pressured to come out as lesbian rather than transgender. Where a child discloses that they are also questioning or exploring their sexual orientation, schools should make clear that they are under no pressure to reach a particular outcome. Yeah, this is all good advice. This is all quite coherent with everything that I have come to read and understand from the trans children issues when it comes to the UK. Because I've done videos on the CAS report, I've done videos into the research behind trans kids, and my main complaint at this point is that I don't necessarily think that the transitioning treatment is good for anyone, sure, but as far as the research has gone, it's our best or only avenue for now. I think it should be expanded into looking into other ways to treat it, but for now, this is not the worst outcome that we can expect. This is actually quite good guidance from what I can tell. The long and short-term impact on the child. We do not yet have definitive evidence on the long-term and short-term impact of changes on children, but the CAS Review's interim report is clear that it could have significant psychological effects on a young person. Schools and colleges should therefore take a cautious approach. And finally, impact on other pupils. Schools and colleges should consider the impact on other pupils, including any safeguarding concerns. Once schools and colleges have balanced all the factors above, including the impact on the child, they may conclude that the impact on the school and college community is such that it may not be possible to agree to support a request. This guidance is very, very much on the sensible side of the spectrum. It's not perfect, it's not as far as I'd want it, but I know that I am quite far removed from the kind of average normies take on this type of thing, because the average normie doesn't really care for any of this. The average normie doesn't think about it. The average normie just thinks, oh, they're a bit weird, but as long as they're doing no harm, who cares? Whereas I tend to think, well, in essence, it is a mental health problem. It should be treated as a mental health problem, not something to be affirmed, but that's an entirely different conversation. As far as I'm concerned with this guidance, it is very much discouraging schools from socially transitioning kids, apart from in circumstances where it pretty much can't be anything other than the child has gender dysphoria, which is very, very good as far as I'm concerned. Will Labour keep this guidance in place? I have my doubts. Completing the above steps will not be sufficient to allow a gender-questioning child access to spaces designated for the other sex, or to sports where it is not safe or fair to take part with the opposite sex. For these matters, schools and colleges should follow the guidance including later in this document. Amazing. So even with all that, they still can't fully socially transition. Excellent. I don't think anyone should fully socially transition, because it's obviously not possible to do that, and especially when, as for some reason a lot of trans activists like to boast, most don't even get bottom surgery. Most keep their equipment from their biological sex rather than the gender they're socially transitioning to. And you've got to bear in mind throughout this video, socially transitioning in quotes, because again, I don't believe you can actually do that. I believe at best you can play dress up. Following the process for decision making will ensure that all members of staff are supporting the child in a consistent way. Members of staff should not unilaterally adopt any changes, including use of a new name or pronoun, unless or until this has been agreed by the school or college in accordance with the proper procedures and, in the vast majority of cases, parental consent, as set out in this guidance. If and where any changes have been agreed, the school or college should communicate this to other pupils and staff where it is necessary and proportionate to do so. This should be done sensitively without implying contested views around gender identity are fact. Other pupils, parents and teachers may hold protected religious or other beliefs that conflict with the decision that the school or college has made. These are legitimate views that must be respected. Amazing. Again, good guidance. This is going to be incredibly rare. When it does happen, it's going to be on a need-to-know basis, and when it is a need-to-know basis, it is not going to be put forward as fact. And the police cannot come around and arrest people who misgender someone. Amazing. This is good guidance, as I say. Genuinely quite impressed with this. This is good work from Kemi Badenoch. So the next section is on specific guidance for different areas of socially transitioning, and most of it is as sensible as you would actually expect. But I do want to go through some of the bigger issues when it comes to transitioning. So first off, we'll look at pronouns. Agreeing to a child's request to have others use different pronouns about them is a significant decision. Primary school aged children should not have different pronouns to their sex-based pronouns used about them. Very good. Until you're in secondary school and you have a bit more of an idea of sex, then maybe then you can transition your pronouns. For other children or older children, schools do not need to specify pronouns to be used about each pupil and can decline a request to change a child's pronouns. Excellent. When a school or college considers a child's request, they should consult the child's parents and consider all the relevant factors as outlined above. Having considered these factors and examined all of the evidence, schools and colleges should only agree to change of pronouns if they are confident that the benefit to the individual child outweighs the impact on the school community. It is expected that there will be very few occasions in which a school or college will be able to agree to a change of pronouns. There you go. Something as simple as changing pronouns, and I will agree is simple, but it's getting a big pushback in this guidance. Again, it's very, very good stuff. This is a total rejection of gender ideology as has been coined. And that is a very good thing, because we have understood sex throughout human history. It only seems to be in the last 50 or so years, especially in universities, where it's all being questioned. And again, the father of these studies was a paedophile. Does that mean he's wrong? No. But it is very strange how paedophiles keep being caught up in all of this trans kids kerfuffle. On these rare occasions, no teacher or pupil should be compelled to use their preferred pronouns. Excellent. And it should not prevent teachers from referring to the children collectively as girls or boys, even in the presence of the child that has been allowed to change their pronouns. Even in the exceptional case where safeguarding requires a school or college to take an alternative approach, schools and colleges should exhaust all other options, such as using a first names to avoid requiring other individuals having to use the preferred pronouns. So again, that's quite good. You can literally reject the preferred pronouns that the school has officially recognised and get in absolutely no trouble for it. And they actually give you good alternatives if you don't want to use the alternative pronouns but do want to respect the child, which again, it'll be rare in the first place anyway. Again, this is quite good guidance. In these exceptional cases, schools or colleges should make sure that all the relevant staff are aware of the gender questioning child's biological sex to fulfil the safeguarding and legal duties. In all cases, bullying of any child must not be tolerated. No child should be sanctioned for honest mistakes when adapting to a new way of interacting with another pupil. Again, they're taking into account that mistakes happen, and you can respectfully decline to use alternative pronouns. Honestly, this is like an early Christmas present. I never expected anything this good to come out of the government. They've been a shambles recently. Honestly, Kemi Badenoch really will be our, hopefully anyway, our next PM, because she doesn't take any guff. And if she's overseen the writing of this report, this is the most impressive thing I've seen come out of government in about, well, probably my entire life. And it's really sad to say that, because this sort of thing should never have been written in the first place. But unfortunately, we're in the clown decade. Whatever decision is taken with regards to the use of the new name or pronoun, schools must still include the legal name and sex of the pupil in the admissions register, as required by the Educational Pupil Registration Regulations, England 2006. Good stuff. That was an excellent section of this report, and there's nothing I disagree with there. It's quite hard to criticise this in any way, because I agree with 99% of it. And this is turning into quite a white-pilled video, so, you're welcome. And it gets better with the single-sex spaces. Schools must always protect single-sex spaces with regard to toilets, showers and changing rooms as set out below. Responding to a request to support any degree of social transition was not include allowing access to these spaces. As a default, all children should use the toilets, showers and changing facilities designated for their biological sex, unless it will cause distress for them to do so. In these instances, schools and colleges should seek to find alternative arrangements while continuing to ensure space for single sex. Good. Exactly what you would expect. This is going to make everyone else uncomfortable, so don't do it. If you don't feel that you can go into a certain space because you'll feel uncomfortable, well, find something else you can do. Use a staff toilet that's individual. Use an individual changing room. We'll work something out for you. This is a good, compassionate approach that isn't going so overboard that everyone else has to feel completely uncomfortable and effectively riot about it. Honestly, very, very impressed with this report, and this continues all the way through. Physical education and sport. Schools and colleges should provide equal sporting opportunities for girls and boys. For most children above a certain age, this will usually require offering female-only sports activities and competitions. Schools and colleges should aim to ensure all children participate in sports safely and should encourage maximum participation. In particular, physical activity participation by girls drops in the teenage years, and it's important that schools and colleges are mindful of any actions that might exacerbate this further. I mean, that bit's all fine, yeah, schools and colleges should provide physical education pretty much equally to boys and girls, but obviously split them up. That's all that's saying. In general, for early primary school aged children, a more relaxed approach can be taken to mixed sex participation in sports. As children get older, though, the size, speed and strength of boys and girls begins to diverge significantly, and that's true no matter what philosophy tube tells you. Schools and colleges that do not provide separate sports for girls are unlikely to be offering them equal opportunities to boys, and for some sports they will be putting girls at undue risk of injury if they have to play on mixed teams. This is true. 60% more upper body strength boys have compared to girls after going through puberty. That is obviously going to cause some injury. For all sports where physical differences between the sexes threatens the safety of the children, schools and colleges should adopt clear rules which mandate separate sex participation. Excellent. There can be no exceptions to this. Excellent. Boys constitute more of a risk to girls because they are generally stronger, larger and heavier than girls, especially when they are going through or have been through puberty. And it's a very annoying thing that the trans activists say. They all say, oh, it's just misogyny, and it's internalised misogyny. Women are just having a go at trans women because they're jealous, because they just hate other girls and things like this. And no, it's not true. They hate it because it's obvious that the trans women have a massive advantage compared to them. Even normal people who have no interest in sport can see this. It would not be safe for a biological boy to participate in certain sports as part of a teenage girl's dream. It's weird how they say biological boy there, but not biological girl. I think they should just take biological out of it. Doesn't matter. The social transitioning you're making clear enough. Where sports are deliberately mixed sex, such as mixed netball, there should be no cause for concern. Well, that makes sense. It's a non-contact sport. Even for sports where safety is not risked by mixed-sex participation, schools and colleges should ensure that a sport is fair. For competitive sports, schools and colleges should be aware that without sex-separate participation, it's unlikely that they will be offering equal opportunities to boys and girls. They should have made that paragraph a lot more clear and say that boys will have an inherent advantage to girls, because they do. But you know what? This is good enough. Again, another sensible guideline in this set of guidelines. I don't have a lot to criticise here. I really don't. It's very impressive. Well done, Kemi Badenoch, yet again. I know I simp for her quite a lot, but it's not just for no reason. It's because Kemi Badenoch genuinely does do a good job with the position she's in, and this is a great example of that. But having said that, it's also been made clear that another real queen of governance was kicked out before her time. Yes, Liz Truss pinned this tweet, by the way, when she said, "My response to today's government guidance, it is not enough. A change in the law is required." Based beyond belief. Today's guidance for schools does not go far enough. It will be exploited by activists and does not sufficiently protect children. We need a change in the law that will define sex as biological sex to protect single-sex spaces. I'm pretty sure it already does that. I'm pretty sure the guidance made that clear. Stop schools formally recognising social transitioning. Yes, I would prefer that, actually. You are correct. Ban under 18s from accessing puberty blockers and hormone treatment for gender dysphoria. Absolutely. That should be law, obviously. Nothing wrong with that, Liz Truss. You were taken when you were far too young. That is why I'm urging the government to back my private member's bill to ensure children are fully protected. Right Honourable Liz Truss MP. Taken from us too early. But again, one step at a time. Maybe this bill hopefully will pass through Parliament before you see Rishi Sunak's government be absolutely trounced at the next election. And naturally, the hit pieces on this piece of guidance were already flying out from The Guardian. Transphobic bullying is rife, a 15-year-old trans boy's view of coming out at school. Newton Carey gave his view after draft guidance was issued by the UK government. Because, of course, a 15-year-old boy knows a lot better than the Cass Review and the governments whose job it literally is to make guidance on this issue. I was always very masculine when I was growing up, telling my mum I didn't want to wear dresses, but I didn't have the words to explain what I felt until I was 11. The words are simple. You're a tomboy. There are absolutely loads of girls growing up that don't want to wear dresses, and they are just tomboys. That year I came out as a trans boy to my family, who was shocked and confused at first, but gave me unwavering support. A few months later I told my school in a letter to my form teacher. The very first thing that happened was he went to my head teacher, who immediately called my mum, asking if she knew I was trans, and if she was okay with it. I wasn't included in the conversation at all. No, but you definitely should have been sent to a psychiatrist or something like that before all these changes were made. I can remember crying to my form teacher about how much it meant to me. I changed my name on the register, but the head teacher said I might upset the younger pupils. By now, I was in my final year of primary school. Okay, yeah, no, this is definitely not how it should have been brought about. This is exactly the type of story of why the guidance is put in place. Because what's happened here is that your typical girl when I was growing up who didn't like wearing dresses, they would explore being a tomboy. They would still see themselves as being a girl, but they'd grow up and end up looking like Avril Lavigne. They would like to think that they are one of the lads, but there would be a very clear social divide between the boys and, you know, the girl in the boys' group who was a tomboy. And sometimes there'd be more than one girl, obviously, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of these tomboys have ended up growing up and actually like wearing dresses and like putting makeup on. It's just when they're younger they do like to do what they see the boys doing, which is fine. It's a perfectly normal part of growing up. But then if you say, oh, you should just transition over then, and all the parents and teachers are doing is saying, oh, we've heard about this in the news, we have a decent understanding of it, yeah, sure, let's just go full on with affirming it. You're effectively taking this child's life and putting it on very strict guidelines to only one particular path, which is not a good thing to do. With tomboys, they can go either direction. There are trans men who will say they were tomboys when they were younger, but an awful lot of them, as I say, will just become regular women. Some of them maybe even become lesbians, but I don't actually think many of them do. So this is exactly why the guidelines have been put in place. You are not putting the child on a strict railway line going straight to Transitionville. Instead, you are forcing them to wait a bit, certainly up until they're 16 and beyond. I've always loved sport and won all the awards for football, rugby, tennis, and I was always one of the boys. But when I came out, everybody rejected me and I didn't feel confident playing sport anymore. When I started secondary school, I was allowed to use the disabled toilets, but the lock on the door didn't work and it didn't feel safe. Well, did you ever tell your school that? That's typically one of the things they fix like that because it's law. I was badly bullied and my mental health plummeted, so I stopped attending and was homeschooled for a year. Now I've joined a 14 to 16-year-old GCSE equivalent group at my local college. I'd hoped things would be different there, but people still laugh and make up rumours about me. Why, yes, I do agree that bullying is bad, but the thing is as well, it's very complicated. I don't just want to say, you're being bullied, therefore you shouldn't have done this. However, teachers can only do so much about bullying. When it came to cyberbullying at my school, I remember, you'd have a few assemblies on the issue, the teachers would have a few words with people in the most extreme cases, but at the end of the day, cyberbullying just kept carrying on. I remember trolling someone's YouTube channel who went to school and he was not happy with that and even called me out. It was incredibly funny. But the reaction to that shouldn't be, don't make a YouTube channel. The reaction to that should be, well, let's find the best way forward with this. And yeah, I think it's bad that you're being bullied. I think it's bad that you got to a point where you had to be homeschooled. But at the end of the day, if you were just having a normal tomboy life before that, none of this would probably have happened and you probably still would have been happy. My secondary school counsellor always said to me that she'd deal with my bullies by the book, but that really meant she was worried about red flags for Ofsted rather than reassuring me that it was okay to abuse me just because I'm trans. Ofsted grade you down if there's bullying at your school. If you deal with bullying, that's actually seen as a good thing by Ofsted. Transphobic bullying is rampant, and I think 100% of this guidance only fuels that fire. I would love to know how much of it you actually read. If I'd been able to exist at my school as a trans kid from the beginning, nobody would have complained because I wasn't asking for anything special. Now, you definitely would have been asking for something special. You're asking for your name to be changed on the register even though it's not your legal name. That is specifically special treatment. The only reason other kids saw the difference was because it was pointed out to them. I mean, isn't the whole point of transitioning that you are pointing out that you are something different? It's inexcusable to say a child needs to have permission to experiment with their name or wardrobe. Oh, you can do that, you just can't do that in any official documents. And when it comes to uniform, yeah, they have uniform. Like, you can do what you want outside of school. When it comes to school, though, them's the rules. Normal kids do that all the time without their parents being informed. Well, yeah, people get nicknames and... I don't know about the wardrobe thing. Well, I certainly never experimented with my wardrobe, apart from on the stage at school, I suppose. But, again, at school, yeah... Everyone has to wear the uniform. No one can officially change their name. I have no idea what you're talking about here. The politicians behind this guidance don't know what it is to be trans. They've never listened to a trans voice, so they don't know what damage it will cause. Well, as it points out in the guidance, actually, all sorts of people were involved in this, so trans voices will have absolutely been part of that guidance when writing it together. So effectively, this is just a 15-year-old having a tantrum, and The Guardian thought that that was good enough to put in their own newspaper, which, to be honest, it reads a lot better than a lot of their opinion pieces, so fair enough to that. But anyway, I wouldn't worry about that, because at the end of the day, this is just guidance, and already we have some people in education just openly saying on television that they're going to ignore it.
The school has single-sex and gender-neutral toilets and says it's never had a challenge from parents. The head says he may not follow some of the government's guidelines.
Well, from what I understand from parents that I do know, they don't feel comfortable actually raising the issue to the school because they genuinely have a fear that they'll be reported to social services. There's pressure for them not to complain about this sort of thing. So not having any raised concerns from parents, as far as I'm concerned, it's meaningless because they are scared that the school will take their kids away.
If schools are about being inclusive, then we need to make sure that we represent every single child that wants to come to school here. Because if you start following some of these guidelines, trans children are going to stop coming to school.
Well, then their parents should make them go, like my parents made my go to school when I didn't feel like it. Again, it's a mass hysteria type of thing that's going on with trans kids at the moment. An awful lot of them grow out of it. What's going to help them grow out of it a lot more is just by the fact that they will understand that it is a huge step if there are all these obstacles in place for them to actually socially transition. And even then, when they socially transition, they can't do it to the way they like. So a lot of them will go, you know what, it doesn't really mean that much to me. Genuinely, part of the reason you're probably seeing so many trans kids and why you're seeing some schools with 25% of kids being trans is because they're actively encouraged to transition. So since we're not in a neutral setting when it comes to this, it's very hard to actually make a judgment on which kids are truly trans and not.
They're going to feel uncomfortable amongst their friends, amongst their peers, and actually school will be somewhere that isn't somewhere that they can be themselves.
Look, school has felt like a place where people can't be themselves forever. That's part of being in society. A lot of people don't feel like they can be themselves in society. That's not a good enough reason to say we're going to make as many kids who question their gender trans as possible. But this is exactly the reason that I support Liz Truss in what she says. This all needs to become law, because if it's not, then as you can see, the guidance is just going to be ignored by the actual problem schools. So hopefully Liz Truss's private members bill will go through and we'll start seeing laws being made about this before the Tories are kicked out. It's a small bit of hope we have before Labour come in and completely ruin everything. Economically things might be fine, but my god, if you think the social sphere of politics is going to get any better under them, I have another thing coming for you. So anyway, with that, that's everything I had for you today. In terms of streams and content and all that, I think that's at least going to be it for me until after Christmas. I will try and find time between Christmas and New Year to at least get a video out. When it comes to streams, I'm hoping I should be available for Tailed Features stream next Wednesday on Regional Variations. Not too sure what's going on at the moment, though. Christmas is all a bit of a haze at the moment with social affairs and events and things like that, but hopefully you will see some of me about. Laughing at the Guardian should be returning next Saturday. I don't have any guests for it yet, but I should be able to fit one in before the start of the new year. The Other Side of the Hill won't be returning until next year, though, and so, as I say, there may be one or two things from me. I may be on Regional Variations. It's not quite clear. I will make things when I can, but we will be definitely returning to normal business when the new year rolls around. So, until then, all I can say is that's everything I had for you today. So, have a very Merry Christmas and a fantastic New Year. Until next time, goodbye.